Okay, thank you everybody for joining, and I hope more people join as time goes by. But today we are very, very fortunate to have a very busy person to talk to us. That is Dr. Maureen Ngoh, and she is actually I met her at the ACS Committee for Professional Training and ACS CPT. And in fact, those are the ACS committee who actually determine about the overall educational guideline and set the good standard for excellent chemistry education. So Maureen is actually serving as one of a committee member with me. So we met during that committee meeting, and we regularly meet from that on. And then after I learned what she does, and I, couldn't wait to invite her. So in fact, we invited her last year, and unfortunately, that event did not happen because it was right in the middle of just the start of the this pandemic. So we delayed, and then who knew? We thought this year we can invite her in person, right? And then here we are again, and so we decided to go ahead and invite her without delaying any further. So I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to let her explain what this is about in animal health, and then hopefully this will spark some engaging conversation with everyone. So thank you, Dr. Onyo. To Iona College, you will meet our
Yeah.
student this way, but hopefully you will be invited to in person to experience how beautiful campus we have.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Make sure give me the so you give me the hands up. Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can
Thank
hear
you.
you.
Okay. So of course the introduction has been given. Let me see if I can move the slides. Can you all see my slides? Okay, got it. Okay, so what I'd like to talk to you today about, I'll just give you a brief introduction about my education and career. I was trained as a chemist, and then I'll talk about where I have worked, which includes the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Veterinary Medicine, as well as my transition to the animal health industry. And then I'll hopefully allow some time where we can have a discussion. So for my background, I did my bachelor's in chemistry at Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. And while I was a junior, I did an internship at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, mainly doing extractions, liquid extractions, and soil extractions for pesticides and herbicides in soil and water. And I did that for a year and a half. Until I graduated. And then once I realized that the role of a bachelor's level chemist was not much in terms of what you could do in working, I decided I would move on to graduate school. So I went to the University of Maryland and I obtained my PhD in analytical chemistry, mainly concentrating on separation sciences, chromatography. And after that, I was hired by the US Food and Drug Administration Center for Veterinary Medicine, and I worked in Laurel, Maryland for 7 years before I moved to New Jersey to work for Schering-Plough Research Institute. It's a pharmaceutical company, but in 2010, we were purchased by Merck. So currently we are Merck Animal Health. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is really when I worked for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Center for Veterinary Medicine, I'll give you an overview of what that agency does and link it to the drug approval or development process, because that's been my career. And I just wanted to say, I did not really start out trying to go work in animal health industry. It was after I got my PhD, it was the only opportunity and the job I got. So I accepted it and I worked in that field and I liked it and I have stayed there for the rest of my career. As an introduction, you guys may all be hearing about the US Food and Drug Administration in the news now because of COVID vaccine testing and approval. So FDA, or the US Food and Drug Administration, is an agency which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. FDA has a broad mandate from the US government. It protects the public health by assuring that foods, except for meat, livestock, poultry, and some egg products, which are regulated by the Department of Agriculture, are safe, wholesome, sanitary, and properly labeled. It also ensures that human and veterinary drugs and vaccines and other biological products and medical devices intended for human use and for use in animals are safe and effective. So FDA protects the public from also use of electronic product radiation. So if you have like pacemakers and any other devices that go into human prosthesis, FDA also regulates that as well as in animals. FDA also ensures that cosmetics and the dietary supplements are safe and properly labeled, and it regulates tobacco products. So FDA advances the public health by helping to speed product innovations. So FDA is a very important agency, and it really has a lot of mandate and power to not only approve, regulate, monitor, and also enforce the rules, okay? So if we look at FDA, I have summarized here all the different products that FDA is responsible for regulating. We talked about foods, we talked about drugs, both human drugs and animal drugs. So for the drugs, it includes all of the prescription drugs you take, as well as the generic drugs, over-the-counter medication. Biologics, all vaccines, all human vaccines, the studies have to be reviewed and approved by FDA. Including blood and blood products, cellular and gene therapy products, tissue and tissue products. We talked about devices, including complex technologies as heart pacemakers, dental devices, surgical implants, and prostheses. Electronic products are also regulated by FDA, such as X-ray equipment, laser products, the equipment we use for mammography, ultrasounds, all of that is regulated by the FDA. In addition to that, the products that go into cosmetics, your color additives found in makeups and personal care products are also regulated by FDA. I did mention tobacco products, smokeless tobacco, cigarettes, all of that. So FDA is a one large organization. And finally, veterinary products is also regulated by FDA. And my talk today will concentrate on veterinary products. So in this pie chart, what I'm showing here is the whole of FDA and which part of FDA's budget is assigned to regulate the different products. And if you look here, the small part which I'm going to concentrate on is animal drugs and animal feeds. And this is only 4% of FDA's workload and budget. So FDA's budget is approximately, it's 5.9 billion, and only 4% of that is dedicated to regulating animal drugs and animal feeds. And so far, if you look at it, there are 1,600 FDA approved animal drugs. And when we talk about animal drugs, that includes drugs that are used for your companion animals, cats and dogs, as well as drugs that are used in production of food producing animals, which is chickens, cows, turkey, goats, sheep, you name it. And I'll give you more details in the slides as we go along. So animal drugs and feed, as I just mentioned, only account for 4% of FDA's budget and only 4% of their workforce. So let's continue now and move more into veterinary drugs or the Center for Veterinary Medicine. So from that pie chart I showed, the FDA is divided into several centers. And the Center for Veterinary Medicine is responsible for animal drugs and feeds. And that's the center I'm going to concentrate on. There are others for human drugs, and we will not talk about that. So the Center for Veterinary Medicine is responsible for assuring that animal drugs and food derived from animal products or food producing animals are safe and are made under sanitary conditions and are properly labeled. So CVM, Center for Veterinary Medicine, in brief, is called CVM, protects the public health by ensuring that approved animal drugs and then animal devices, just like we have devices used in humans, we have them also for animals. And also animal food additives are safe and effective. So CVM ensures that food derived from animals that have been treated with medication. If you have a sick cow on a farm and a farmer treats the cow, it's the meat or the liver or kidney that you would take from that cow when you kill it. Is it safe for humans to consume it? That is part of our job as drug sponsor representative and also Center for Veterinary Medicine to determine when it's safe for humans to eat that particular food product. So CVM regulates use of the drugs also in companion animals. If you have pets, you know they do get sick, right? And you have to have certain medications approved for specific conditions for the pets. It's another control. So in terms of the food producing animals that they regulate, all drugs are for use in chickens, turkey, pigs, beef cattle, dairy cattle, sheep, goats, etc., including aquaculture, fish, shrimp, lobster, crabs. For fish, it's mainly catfish raised in Louisiana area, and then we also have a tilapia, which is grown in farms. But most of the other types of fish and shrimp, they're imported. But even for imported products, FDA still has to regulate, is the food coming into the US, all imported products, are they safe to be allowed in and for humans to consume them? So that's part of their job. And so CVM ensures that methods, facilities, controls used for the manufacturing of the drugs, processing and packaging of foods and animal drugs are adequate to preserve the identity, the strength, the quality, and purity of the drug. CVM oversees animal products, animal products industry for compliance, right? Compliance in terms of our medications that are approved for use for a particular disease condition. Are they being used as approved? And so they issue regulations and they also provide training to people in the field, veterinarians, as well as the scientists, how to conduct the studies, how to go through the approval and send the documents. And also they are responsible for enforcement. If you do not use products that have been approved according to how it was approved, you could have enforcement action against you if you're a manufacturer, producer, or sponsor. So that's part of their job. And CVM, and once the drug is approved, we do have post-market activities for which the Center for Veterinary Medicine monitors use of the product. It's just like in human drugs. You know, sometimes you hear about adverse events down the road when the drug was approved. All of that have to be reported to CVM because either you may modify the label of the approved drug or the drug may be withdrawn from the market if it becomes, it's not doing, or it's shown to be adverse to people of a certain generation. Because if you think about it, the studies we do it in a small section of the population. But again, there is variability, a lot of variability when you put the drug out for use, just same with human drugs. So let me move on now and go into the drug development process itself and the studies that we conduct in order to submit a package for approval of a drug. So I will start by definition. I'm sure you all know what the definition of a drug is, but let's just go back and refresh. So a drug is any article intended for use in the diagnosis, the cure, mitigation, treatment, and prevention of disease in man or other animals. A new animal drug may receive FDA approval after the sponsor conducts studies to show that the drug is safe and effective. And safe and effective are big categories because there are a lot of studies we have to do to show that. For safety, safety includes, well, safe includes safety for animal drugs. It has to be safe to the animal. It has to be safe if you're using it in a food producing animal, the products derived from that animal. I talked about the beef, the liver, the kidney, maybe the fat, which is mostly eaten, edible products from the animal. Derived from the animal, is it safe for humans to consume? And you also talk about safety for the animal handlers who are administering the product, the drug to the animals. Is it safe for their use? So we have to do all the studies to show that. And the other part too is that when you use drugs on animals, if the animals are on a farm, in terms of like cattle in a field, right? The cattle waste goes on the field and sometimes is collected as manure and put into farming. Is the drug or the remaining part of the drug residue safe for that environment, or is it affecting environmental species? You know, like the worms on the ground, the bees, the flies, and anything else that comes in contact with that drug, is it safe for use? So it's not just safety to the animal. For animal drugs, there is a lot involved with it as well. Effectiveness means when that particular drug is given to the animal, the particular dose that's on the label, and for the duration of which you're administering that drug, will it treat the condition that is on the label for the drug? You have to show that, the disease condition. Will the animal get better? Or if it's a product for a growth enhancement, is there any change, right? So we have to do studies to also provide that information prior to approval. So for drug sponsors, if you're developing a new animal drug, first of all, we go through a discovery section where you do some pilot studies. You know, you're developing the formulation and you've tested small groups of animals with the particular condition and several different concentrations. And once you realize that the drug will work, then you go into what's called development, and then you have controlled studies. And you will file what's called a new animal drug application with the Center for Veterinary Medicine or the FDA, just to indicate to them that, by the way, Merck Animal Health is developing a new drug, and they'll give you a number. And you'll meet with them, and depending on if the drug is to be used for companion animals, cats and dogs, or for food-producing animals, chickens, goats, cattle, whatever, then we'll sit with them and they'll talk about the 7 different sections we're going to go into and the types of studies that are required for each technical section to complete the requirements for approval. So the first technical section we'll talk about is chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. We have the second section is effectiveness, which is your clinical studies. There's target animal safety. We also have human food safety. Human food safety, keep in mind, as I said, only applies to food producing animals, right? Animals used for consumption, chickens, goats, eggs, cattle. Your human food safety section will not be part of a drug development for a companion animal, either a cat or dog. We also talked about I'll go into details about environmental impact or assessment, and then the labeling, and finally, all other information. So this process from step 1, chemistry, manufacturing, and there are multiple studies in the different sections going on together to the end of labeling, from the initiation, and this is only development, from the initiation to when the drug is approved. If it's for a companion animal, it will take about 5 to 7 years. But if it's for a food producing animal, the development process to approval, it's 9 to 12 years. It's a very long time. Okay. Okay. Let me, I don't know, I got, okay. All right, let me give you a little bit more details into the different sections. So the first section, chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. So what is that? Here is where you have the drug substance that was discovered that it could have a potential effect to treat a particular condition. And so this group is responsible for developing the formulation, right? So we have, of course, a lot of chemists in this group because the formulation chemists will put the drug into several different vehicles and then decide, is the drug better to be administered as a tablet orally, or is it an injectable, or a solution, or IV intramuscular, or should it be applied intradermal, or and again, for how long of the duration? So these are chemists in this section that do those studies and play around with the different formulations and then pass it on to us. And we do the animal studies to figure out which is the best route and will it treat the conditions. So when you're developing studies to fulfill the chemistry, manufacturing, and control section, the important things to think about is the ingredients that will be used for developing the drug. You have to test for the purity, right? And also if there are other contaminants present in that drug substance, can the manufacturing process to produce that raw material, is it consistent? And can you ensure that if you indicate your raw material is 99% purity, is it always 99% purity? Because there's always a minimum amount of purity required. So where do the ingredients come from? Where are you purchasing the ingredients? Most of the times it's out of the country. Where will the drug be made? The manufacturing site, and how will it be made? The process, and the engineers are involved in that as well. How will it be packaged? How will it be stored? Is it at room temperature? Is it refrigerated or a freezer? And under what conditions and for how long? You also have to test how long it will be stable for. Is it, of course, you don't want a drug that will only be stable, or formulation at the end that will only be stable for a year. You would like to go out to at least 2 or 3 years because that's how long it takes us to do some of the studies. So that is chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. And this is similar for animal drugs as well as human drugs. And we do have a lot of chemists working in this group. So the next section we'll talk about is effectiveness studies, and mostly these are conducted by veterinarians or people who studied animal sciences. And here, the drug sponsor must show that the drug works in the target animal species when it is used according to label. So the veterinarians or the animal scientists will do what we call field studies. And these field studies must be done in 3 different locations within the US. For example, if you're developing a drug that is an anti-parasitic drug for which you're treating fleas on the animal's body or whatever, you want to make sure that the field studies are conducted in areas where that condition is prevalent. So definitely it would be Texas, California, and maybe somewhere on the East Coast. And of course, the season for which the disease condition is prevalent, and that would be summertime. And then depending on that too, the number of animals used for the field studies, it's a large study. If you're using cattle for each site, you may have about 800 cows for the study. And the reason being, there's a lot of animal to animal variability, similar to what you have humans variability. And also, you want to make sure that you have enough animals that started the study and ended the study. So in this case, you're going to take the final formulation of the drug that has been manufactured by the CMC chemistry section I just talked about, and you would administer it to the diseased animals, and for given by the particular route that the drug is intended for, and for the duration, and at the exact label dose. For example, if a cow has bovine respiratory disease, we do have a product called flunixin, and it's an injectable. We would administer it to the cow, and we would do an injection, and this is done on the neck, on the left side, the first day. Second, on the opposite side, on the second day, it's 3 injectable injections administered within 24 hours. And after you do that, plasma will be collected, and we will analyze the plasma to determine the amount of drug residue in the plasma for pharmacokinetic modeling, just to show that we had this, you want to show that the amount of drug you have present coincides also with the effectiveness or treating the condition. So that's one of the big studies we do. Its effectiveness is done by the clinical group, and it's mostly veterinarians or animal scientists in that group. And again, I guess I should mention that, which I probably did a little bit in the beginning, all the studies we conduct, the Center for Veterinary Medicine has guidance, and we always meet with them to discuss the study design before we go into the actual studies. So there are regulatory requirements that must be fulfilled, and how each study is conducted and what the end result and end product is for each study. So the third section we're talking about is the target animal safety study. So the drug sponsor must show that the drug is safe to the target animal species when it is used according to the label. And so the two goals of this study are, you want to identify any harmful side effects of the drug to the animal. Because of course, depending on the side effects, we may not pursue that drug because we know it's not going to be approved, the severity of the side effect. So, and the second part of it is, you want to establish a margin of safety for the drug. So the margin of safety is usually determined by testing the drug at a higher concentration than the label dose, and for a longer than labeled time period in the target animal. For example, if we're developing something for maybe a dog and the intended concentration is 0.5 milligrams per kilogram of the particular indication, in the target animal safety study, you'll do a 1x study, which means you'll give 0.5. You'll also do a 3x study and a 5x study to see if the dog is overdosed. What are the side effects you will see in the animal? Because that may also come into play when we do the label as a warning for veterinarians or for people using the drug. So the drug's margin of safety is like a cushion or safety net to make sure that the drug will be safe when it is used in animals that may be sick or sensitive to the drug. And so during the study, the sponsor, we collect information, safety information on the drug, as well as we examine the animals, observe their behavior, look at blood work. Again, like I indicated, we would measure the drug level in plasma, blood, collect blood and measure it, and to determine if we're doing drug for food producing animal, we would look at the tissues, and the tissues we would collect would be the liver, the kidney, muscle, and also skin fat, which is mostly applicable to chickens, turkey, and even in cattle, we'll also look at the skin fat. So that is the third section, the target animal safety study. And mostly we do have toxicologists, people who study advanced toxicology are the ones doing the studies. But the tissues they collect, the plasma, maybe the kidney and liver, they'll pass it on to the chemist to do the separations and analysis to measure the drug residue. Ooh, time, okay. So the human food safety section, which is the group I work for, we mostly deal with food producing animals and the tissues that originate from that. So we're working with cattle, chickens, turkey, pigs, and sheep. And the goal of the studies is to make sure that the level of drug in the food, as I indicated, whatever remains in the animal's tissue and you eat it for a long period of time, you will have no adverse event, or it's not hazardous to humans. That is one of the reasons why we do human food safety. If the drug is an antibiotic drug intended for animals, again, the sponsor, which is industry, you have to show that over time, when people eat residues of the drug, you will not develop a resistance to antibiotics, which is something we hear about a lot in the public now. And so for that reason, antibiotics are not really being developed or used a lot in animals anymore because they're reserved for human medicine. So the 4 slices of the human food puzzle include toxicology studies. So by looking at information about the drug, toxicologists will determine what we call acceptable daily intake, which means how much residue, how much concentration of that drug can stay in the tissues that if a person were to eat it every given day for their life, it will still be considered safe. That's part of the studies that the toxicologists do. Then for the chemists like us, what we do is we get the tissues and we develop methods, analytical methods to be able to measure the drug residues in kidney, liver, muscle, plasma, and other tissues. And then the other part of it is the microbial food safety, which again is only applicable to antibiotics. So most of our work as analytical chemists, we use chromatography, liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry in particular for most of our analytical methods. But if you were to work for EPA, you would do mostly gas chromatography and mass spectrometry for detection. So the 5th major section for a new animal drug development is the environmental impact, which I touched briefly about. And that really is how use of the drug in animals, if the waste stays in the environment, either soil or in water, over time, do you have a cumulative effect? And is it changing organisms in the environment? So you have to do studies to show what the effect of that is. And so that's another major section. Impact, you also have chemists working together with toxicologists to be able to do those studies. So the minor sections would include the labeling. Once we've done all the other studies and we've completed them, if you look at even your human drugs, the vial contains a label. How do you determine what goes on the label, the actual dose, the duration, how is it administered, and then also the outside packaging and the insert, information, warnings to tell people if you overdose or the side effects. All of that information goes on the labeling of animal drugs, just like it does on human drugs. And published literature is just information on other investigators who study the drugs, maybe at universities or other research sites. They also publish information to say if the drug is effective or not, or what the impact is. So as I indicated, the drug development process is a very long one. It could take anywhere from 5 to 7 years for drugs for companion animals, and anywhere from 9 to 12 months. And after we've collected all this information, Center for Veterinary Medicine, and ensure that and if there are any deficiencies, they will communicate that to us, and we may have to do additional studies. And if everything checks out for the 7 different sections, then you will have your 2 different sections, then you will have your 2 market drug. Okay. So I just wonder a little bit role in the various, and I said when I just wonder veterinary medicine, what I did was, as a scientist, I did expose them on a liquid chromatograph and mass spectrometry to measure the amount of drug residue. In this CDOs, how to actually carry out the method, and also for your instruments, they have to be calibrated, and also how to use the instruments. The other part of the job is When you do the studies, you have to write study designs, or what they call protocols. And these are shared with the FDA and the regulators. They have to review it and accept your study design before you actually conduct the study. And at the end of the study, you'll do a final report and also analyze the data. So from the food and drug, I came to industry, Sharing Flower Research Institute, which is now Merck Animal Health. And again, my training and background as a regulator, I transferred to industry, similar types of studies, except on the side for industry now, I work with animals, dosing the animals, collecting the tissues, and then actually doing the analysis. So I am at the front end of the development process right now, as opposed to being at the back end as a reviewer and approving the studies. So the studies, I talked about metabolism and pharmacokinetic studies, and also there's a lot of regulations and guidance on how to do the studies, but you learn all of this on the job as you go along. The other part of it is when we submit studies to regulatory agencies, they may ask questions, send you questions back on either the design or the results. Why did you do it a particular way? So you have to respond to it, organize the data, you have to do technical presentations. You also have to be present if they happen to come on site for an inspection to see how you're conducting the studies. The other part of it, good part, is that we also, in the scientific environment, we give presentations and talks to our fellow scientists as well. So I just wanted to highlight some of the skills, aside from your chemistry technical skills, that are required in order for you to succeed in industry. Communications is a big part of it. Oral communications, to be able to explain complex experimental results. Written communication, you have to be able to write reports, define what you did, extract the data, analyze it, and really report what the results are. And you don't work as an individual, you work as part of a team, because in a development with the 7 different technical sections I said, you will be part of a project team, and therefore you have to be able to collaborate with other team members. Critical thinking skills is another important one, to be able to conduct experiments, analyze data, and interpret it. And of course, credibility, work ethics, right? Data integrity is a big thing when you work in a regulated environment. Your experiments have to be well documented, and you have to really show that you did what you said you did. Creativity, and of course, professional development. So in brief, I hope I was able to give you a little flavor for what it takes to work, as a chemist in drug development for animal drugs. And now I'll open it up to questions you have. I know the time is short. Yeah. Any questions?
Wow, that was, I have to tell you, Maureen, and I have my companion listening,
Yeah, I see.
very nice behaving, and then listening to the talk, didn't bark once and then interrupted it. So he must have known that this is something important. It's funny. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because I love dog, and many of audience here also all lovers for dogs and cats and all that. It struck me that one of the things that you look at is the behavior. There is a side effect as a drug is behavior.
Yes.
And there is one drug that I remember using it for my dog, and then his behavior is very different. So I had to stop it. He became very aggressive about everything. He never been behaving that way, but immediately one dose. So I can tell. So when I see that line, and I just knew exactly what that meant.
So if you look at the packet insert for every drug, there is information there, and there is a number or website that if you give a medication to, like, your dog, and you had that abnormal behavior, you should report it, because we do collect information while the drug is on the market. And if enough people complain, we have to go back and investigate. What is it? because it may also have been maybe a side effect that was observed during development, but in a small group of the percentage of the population that was tested. Yeah. But
Oh, I
next
see.
time, yeah, you could either talk to your veterinarian, but look at the label more closely.
Mm-hmm.
It tells you what the expected side effects are. But if you get an unusual adverse event or side effect, report it. You have to, or you
Will
should.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will have others ask questions.
Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
I have one. So for the effectiveness studies, how
Mhm.
extensive do the tests have to be since they must apply for many different animals?
Say that again. How,
So for the effectiveness studies, how
yes.
extensive do the studies have to be since they must apply to many different animals?
How you said how sensitive?
How extensive?
Oh, how extensive? Very extensive. For the effectiveness studies, because you're going to show that you can treat the disease condition. I think I am not a vet and I don't work in that group, but I think if I remember correctly, it's like a 95% positive rate for treating the disease condition. And because you're doing 3 different sites, if you're doing like cattle, I talked about the minimum of 800, it would be for each site. So that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of cows, a lot of money, but again, you have to ensure that what you're putting out in the market truly works for the intended purpose for which we're developing the drug. Yeah. But for us chemists, when we do the studies, maybe for cows, our sample size is a lot smaller. A typical sample size for my study would be like 80 to 100 cows compared to an effectiveness study that uses over 800. Yeah. Any other questions? So there is, I just wanted to finish by saying that as a chemist in industry, all I talked about was the research aspect. There are other options for career paths, and even in animal health industry, you could go into marketing, you could go into sales, communications. I mean, a lot of different avenues, and you guys have it today where the choices are unlimited. But it would be very helpful if you could try to do an internship, if you can land an internship in industry, so that will help you to see all the different career paths which you can pursue, and not necessarily go straight for a PhD in chemistry, but combine with another degree or something, depending on your interest.
So, Maureen, does Merck has any internship, your company?
Merck has internships, yes. Unfortunately, the time to apply has passed. It opens up in the fall. And I think somewhere around September, October. If you look on our website in the jobs section, they do, I think we get close to about 400 interns a year, and it varies from chemists, biologists, engineers. Yeah, we do have internship. And it's been done virtual now because of course we're all working from home. But it's still a very good way for you to explore the different career paths.
So you gave us a very in-depth information about what it takes and what kind of things are needed to develop such drug, equally extensive as a human drug. Obviously, there is consequences, right?
Yeah.
So therefore,
Yes.
we can take it lightly. Or in your opinion, what seems to be the biggest challenge in this animal health? Obviously, it looks like FDA consider only 4% allocation in terms of money and resources. And do you see the biggest challenge that you face as a scientist working in this animal health, and for other scientists, future scientists who's going to work in that field?
So I'll tell you, when you work for industry, of course you would think human health is more regulate, well, I shouldn't say more regulated. When the studies are reviewed, animal drugs, food producing animal drugs, the review process is more stringent than it is for human drugs. Because, well, for human drugs, you have to show safety to humans. For animal drugs, you have to show safety to the animal, to humans, to the user. And because you're going to consume the food from the food producing animals, and you could get accumulation over your lifetime, that becomes a factor that really determines before the approval. So food producing animals, it's very difficult to get an approval. And that's just the way it is. Companion animals, cats and dogs, it's a little bit easier because of course you don't get tissues that you eat from those animals. But anything that goes into our bodies, very stringent, and that's the area we work in. And so the studies are, when you conduct the studies, a little bit difficult, and it takes a long time to get an approval, right? I talked about 9 to 12 years. So you'll be working on the same product for a long time before you ever see the end of the day. Yeah. But it's all fun when you get one, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, it is not related to animal health, but when you first mentioned about FDA or the thing, because you have experience as well as you work with FDA right now. So I had thought that this nutraceutical, something that you sell in the health store, is not regulated, as well as cosmetics are not FDA regulated. Is that right?
Okay. So I should say they are under the purview of the Food and Drug Administration, but they are not pre-approved. Okay. FDA is supposed to regulate it, but they do not do studies like you would do for a drug, because they're not claiming that it's going to treat a condition unless it becomes a problem and they're mislabeling what nutraceuticals can do. Then the FDA will come in and try to investigate. But they do not go through pre-approval. That's the difference. It's the same with the additives in cosmetics are not pre-approved, right? Even though it's under the umbrella of FDA for regulation, FDA does not have enough manpower workforce to be able to regulate everything for which the law requires it to regulate. So they pick, well, I shouldn't say they pick and choose. The big important ones, of course, are the drugs and your foods, animals, which is what they concentrate on.
Right. Yeah, I see. Anyone have any questions? If not, I'm going to ask again. Because
Okay.
I wonder if the human case, when you do a clinical trial, and then not only observation, but also you have to say how you feel and all that kind of thing. And we can't do that with animal. And then somebody has to just observe the behavior and, oh, that one is now behaving this way and that way. So it's all an interpretation. It may be pain, feeling pain or something. So, I mean, I know you don't have an answer for that one, but I wondered about how do they do that? I mean, they can't talk back to you how they feel.
So they work with the FDA or Center for Veterinary Medicine to establish some tests for which they're going to be able to measure certain conditions in the animals. Pain is a good one you talked about. It is very difficult to measure pain in cows, but not being a veterinarian, and I'm speaking as a lay person, they do say, depending on how they're walking, like a person, right? If your leg is swollen or hurt, you're not going to be walking straight like you normally do. Animals also have that tendency, and I'm sure you would see it with your dog or cat as well, right? So that's how they develop certain standards for which they use to measure, observe clinical behaviors and do a check mark if it's a problem or not. Yeah.
I'm going to say, you guys, since you guys are home, you have to show your pet, your dog and the cat now before we end it. That's a
everybody
requirement.
has a pet?
Yeah, I already show mine, so that's the wonderful way to wrap up this session and showing. Okay, I'm going to show mine again. Hey, say hello and thank you for
That's
developing
a cute
wonderful
little
drawings.
dog.
I know.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I want to see some other things, but thank you so much. This was very helpful. I don't think we have uh, this type of a talk for over a decade. We've been doing that, but I don't think at a single time that any topic relate to what you discussed was discussed. So that's giving us a different perspective about it. So thank you so
yeah,
much for your time doing that. I know you've been busy working from remotely, so having additional Zoom
yeah.
meeting is not taken lightly, but you spend great deal of time with us. So
So,
I wanted
and so I'd say if you have any questions, Ming Shu has my, sorry, Sung Yi has my email address. Oh, I could give it to you, maureen@merck.com. And I'll make sure, Sung Yi, that next year when the internships open up, I will make sure I inform you so you can let your students know it's time to apply. Because all the pharmaceutical companies, Novartis, Merck, uh, you name it, Pfizer, they all have internships, Regeneron. It's just, you have to apply early on in the year, in the fall. I think it's September or October, because by January or February, they've already established who's coming in, and we're still doing internships remotely. And you do get, like I said, you get projects and you sit in meetings. It's a really good way and feel to get you to really determine or have an idea of, if I were to go into this field, what would I be doing on a day-to-day basis? It helps a lot.
great. Thank you. We'll keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Sure.
And I have her
Okay. All right.
email
Bye-bye.
address. If you have a very specific question about Merck and what she does, I will pass it on to you.
Okay. Thank you,
Great.
guys.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.